Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Everybody's got pain in their lives, but one of the things that I've talked about in these videos and that many people talk about in recovery circles is that people in active addiction do not tend to address their pain head on. They tend to try to avoid that pain. By avoiding the pain, it causes more problems. The pain compounds, they develop resentment, and so part of recovery is learning how to face our pain and learning how to face the uncomfortable things in life head on so that we can cope with them, process them, and move past them rather than becoming weighed down by them. And I want to read some of what Tommy Rosen has to say about this in his book, Recovery 2.0. Really does a good job of describing how the avoidance type of strategies that we use in addiction can often cause people in addiction to just sink lower and lower and lower. So this is a good section to help not only those in addiction understand what they're going through, but those who have never been through addiction to understand what's happening. He writes, "The more drugs I took, the more my anger and other issues were pushed down inside me. The drugs acted as a suppressant, which would take care of the symptoms but never touch the core disease. I was still reaching some ecstatic places through drugs and dancing, but it cost me. The original hurts never got dealt with, so all the subsequent hurts got piled on top. It gets to the point where you're feeling emotions that no longer correspond to what is actually happening at the present moment. This is deep-seated resentment, and it is a killer. Without being able to work it out, the pressure of the need to feel better from it will overwhelm you and cause you to go deeper into darkness than you may have thought was possible." I want to go back to what he says earlier when he says, it gets to the point where you are feeling emotions that no longer correspond to what is actually happening in the present moment. So for me, in my addiction, I overreacted to so many situations, and this still happens in recovery, and I have to be very mindful of it. And that's the big difference is now I have more ability to see it when it happens and recognize it when it happens. But in my addiction, I overreacted to the smallest of things because I was in this situation he talks about. I had all this pain that I had never dealt with, that I had never processed. It had piled up on top of everything that I was dealing with, and then I felt these strong, intense emotions that didn't really correspond to whatever situation I was in. People could do little things that inconvenienced me, and I would turn it into this huge resentment or personal attack. I might have to work late one night, and it became this horrible thing that was so stressful when my colleagues were just doing it. You know, my colleagues would just, they didn't like it, but they just dealt with it and did it and moved on. And I always thought, how are you not as upset about this as I was? And part of the reason was I was very deep-seated in my addiction, and any slight, anything that took me away from that addiction or threatened the routine that I had set up, really, I took that personally, and I would get very upset by it. The other thing that he mentions is without being able to work it out, the pressure of the need to feel better from it will overwhelm you and cause you to go deeper into the darkness than you may have thought was possible. And this is why so many people who have substance use disorders have experience with deep, profound depression. Because when we don't process our emotions, when we let pain continue to pile on top, we just get deeper and deeper and deeper. It's kind of like if you were standing in very cold water, and you put a blanket on to warm up. Well, you fix the problem of being cold temporarily, but then you're still in the cold water, and so you add another blanket, and so now you're a little warmer, but you're also sinking. And as you sink, you get colder, so you add more blankets, which causes you to sink even further. And you keep trying to warm yourself up when really what you need to do is get out of the damn water. And that's what it feels like to me and what it felt like to me when I was in addiction. I was using drugs and alcohol like the blankets, when what I really needed to do was fix the root problems of being in this frigid water. So I like the way that Tommy puts this. I think it's a really great way to think about the way that alcoholics and addicts, people with substance use disorders, avoid dealing with pain, and what happens when we don't do that and end up slipping down into a depression that unfortunately in a lot of cases leads to some very terrible consequences for people. So a big part of the solution is to figure out how do we cope with that pain. And Tommy will address that, I'm sure, a little bit later in the book. Today, I just wanted to talk about what that pain was. That's a lot of recovery programs like AA, Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery. These programs really deal with how do we address this pain so that it's not weighing us down, continuing to cause these problems, and so that we can move on in life without having to resort to something to avoid the pain in the first place. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Have a good one.